A storm hits the city. A powerful CEO steps outside, stone-faced, untouchable, until a young community worker collapses at his door with a soaked box of letters. Letters from his late mother. One message says, "Protect the one place his company plans to erase." For the first time, he pauses the bulldozers, and hope breaks through. But a shadow moves, a hidden clause, a dirty leak, and a lie that turns kindness into scandal. Who planted the rumor? Why did his mother save these letters for this exact moment? And what secret photo links his childhood to the very center he's set to destroy? When money, pride, and mercy collide in the rain, will a man who always says no finally say yes before everything and everyone he cares about is gone? The rain hammered against the glass walls of Hale Development's lobby like angry fists. Ethan Hale stood frozen, his usually sharp mind struggling to process what he'd just heard. His mother's name, spoken by this stranger, sent a jolt through his carefully ordered world. The young woman lay on the leather lobby couch, still unconscious but breathing steadily. Water dripped from her rain-soaked clothes onto the expensive upholstery, but for once, Ethan didn't care about the damage to company property. His eyes were fixed on the cardboard box that security had brought in with her. "Sir." Marcus, the head of security, touched his shoulder. "Should I call an ambulance?" Ethan shook his head, his throat tight. "Not yet. Give her a minute." He knelt beside the couch, studying her face. She was pale, with dark circles under her eyes, suggesting many sleepless nights. Her clothes were worn but clean. Not homeless then, but definitely struggling. The lobby staff hovered anxiously, unused to seeing their CEO show such personal attention to anyone. Ethan ignored them, gently patting the woman's cheek. "Miss, can you hear me?" She stirred, eyelids fluttering. "The letters," she mumbled. "Have to deliver." "I'm Ethan Hale," he said softly, surprising himself with his gentleness. "You mentioned my mother?" Her eyes opened fully then, focusing on his face. "Mr. Hale!" She tried to sit up too quickly and swayed. Ethan steadied her with a hand on her shoulder. "Careful," he said. "You fainted outside. Take it slow." "The box," she said, looking around frantically. "Where's the box?" "It's right here." Ethan gestured to where it sat on a nearby table, water still seeping from its corners. "What's this about letters from my mother?" The woman pushed herself up to sitting position, clutching the towel someone had draped over her shoulders. "My name is Sarah Mitchell. I was helping clear out my grandmother's attic last week when I found these." She pointed at the box. "They're addressed to you, from Eleanor Hale. My grandmother was her nurse." At the end. Ethan's hands clenched involuntarily. 20 years had passed since his mother's death, but the pain still felt fresh when he least expected it. "That's impossible," he said flatly. "My mother died when I was 12. Any letters would have been delivered back then." Sarah shook her head. "These were different. They were meant to be delivered over time, on specific dates. But my grandmother, she had her own troubles back then. She forgot about them until she passed away last month." Her voice cracked slightly. "I found them when we were cleaning out her house. As soon as I realized what they were, I knew I had to get them to you." Ethan stared at the soggy box, his heart pounding. His mother had always been organized, always planning ahead. Even in her final days, she'd thought of everything, including, apparently, messages for her son's future. "How many?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. 20 letters, Sarah replied. 1 for each year after she... She trailed off, watching his face carefully. The lobby felt too small suddenly, too public for this moment. Ethan stood abruptly, straightening his tie in a nervous gesture. "Marcus, please have someone drive Miss Mitchell home and bring that box to my office. Mr. Hale." Sarah protested, standing shakily. I know this must be overwhelming, but please, read them. Your mother worked so hard on these when she was sick. She wanted you to have them. Ethan looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the same kind of determination his mother used to show. This woman had braved a dangerous storm just to deliver these letters. Thank you, he said quietly, for bringing them. She nodded, seeming to understand that he needed space to process this. As Marcus led her towards the door, she turned back. There's one more thing. The first letter. It was meant for your 32nd birthday. That's tomorrow, isn't it? Ethan felt like he'd been punched in the gut. Of course, his mother would have timed it this way. Even now, she was taking care of him. He watched Sarah leave, then picked up the box with trembling hands. Inside his composed exterior, a storm of emotions raged as fiercely as the one outside. The box felt impossibly heavy as he carried it toward the elevator. Not from its physical weight, but from the weight of 20 years of unspoken words, of all the conversations he never got to have with his mother. His finger hovered over the button for his office floor, but he couldn't press it yet. Through the lobby windows, he could see the rain still pouring down, distorting the city lights into blurry halos. Somewhere in that storm, a mother's long-delayed messages waited to be read, threatening to shake the foundations of the carefully controlled life he'd built since losing her. 20 letters. 20 years. And the first one was meant for tomorrow. Ethan stood in the lobby, holding his mother's last gift, as the storm raged on outside and his own emotional tempest swirled within. The box in his hands held more than just paper and ink. It held his mother's voice, reaching across time to speak to him once more. Ethan jabbed the intercom button on his desk. Marcus, get medical assistance to the lobby, now. His voice remained steady, controlled, despite the unsettling situation unfolding before him. The young woman lay on one of the lobby's leather benches, her rain-soaked clothes creating a dark puddle beneath her. A security guard hovered nearby, looking uncertain. The pristine marble floors of Hale Development's headquarters seemed to mock the disheveled scene. Within minutes, a paramedic from the building's medical office arrived, kneeling beside the unconscious woman. As he checked her vital signs, her eyes fluttered open, revealing warm brown irises that appeared slightly disoriented. I'm fine, she mumbled, trying to sit up. Really, I just slipped. Ma'am, please stay still while I examine you. The paramedic insisted. She shook her head, droplets of water falling from her dark hair. My name is Amaya Brooks, and I have to make sure. Her eyes found Ethan, recognition sparking. The letters. Did someone get the box? Marcus appeared with the cardboard box, now wrapped in towels. Right here, Mr. Hale. Amaya's relief was visible. Thank goodness. She turned to Ethan, her voice gaining strength. Mrs. Chen gave me those to deliver to Ruth Hale's son. She said it was important. Ethan's jaw tightened at his mother's name. Mrs. Chen. From Oak Street. She's 92 now, but she knew your mother years ago. Amaya winced as the paramedic checked her blood pressure. She found these letters while cleaning out her attic last week. The paramedic finished his examination. No signs of concussion, but you should rest for a while. Would you like us to call someone? No need, Amaya said firmly. I just need Mr. Hale to read those letters. They're from your mother, written before she passed away. Mrs. Chen said they were meant to be delivered over time, but she forgot about them until now. Ethan maintained his professional mask, but inside, his thoughts churned. His mother had died 20 years ago. Any legitimate correspondence would have been handled by the estate lawyers. This had to be some elaborate scheme related to the Oak Street Center demolition plans. He signed the medical release form the paramedic presented. Marcus, please arrange transportation for Ms. Brooks to wherever she needs to go. He picked up the box, its weight seemingly disproportionate to its size. Thank you for your delivery. though I suspect this is a waste of everyone's time." Amaya stood carefully, determination replacing the earlier weakness in her expression. "Just read them, Mr. Hale, please. Your mother wanted you to have these." Ethan turned away without responding, the box tucked under his arm as he strode to the private elevator. He told himself he was only taking it to have his legal team examine it for potential fraud. Hours later, in his 38th floor apartment, the box sat accusingly on his glass coffee table. The storm still raged outside, lightning, occasionally illuminating the sparse furnishings of his living space. Everything was sleek, modern, and carefully chosen, except for this soggy intrusion from the past. Ethan poured himself 2 fingers of scotch and stared at the box. The rational part of his mind listed all the reasons to ignore it. Likely fraud, emotional manipulation, waste of time. But his mother's name kept echoing in his thoughts. "Damn it," he muttered, setting down his untouched drink. He opened the box with surgical precision, careful not to tear anything. Inside, protected by plastic sleeves, lay a stack of envelopes. The handwriting on the first one stopped his breath. He knew those loops and curves, the slight tilt to the letters. He'd seen them on countless notes in his lunchboxes, on birthday cards, on the last Christmas gift she'd ever given him. His fingers trembled slightly as he opened the envelope. "My dearest Ethan," the letter began. "If you're reading this, I'm no longer with you, and I'm so sorry for that. There's so much I want to tell you about forgiveness, about faith, about the plans God has for your life. But mostly, I want to tell you about a promise." Ethan's throat tightened as he read on. "The Oak Street Center saved us when we had nothing. Remember those meals we shared there? The people who became our family? I made a promise to God and to those people that someday we would help preserve this place of hope for others who need it. I'm leaving this promise in your hands, my wonderful boy." The letter continued with memories and gentle guidance, but Ethan couldn't read any more. He slammed the box shut, the sound echoing in his minimal apartment. This wasn't happening. He wouldn't let sentimentality derail 20 years of calculated business decisions. He headed to his bedroom, determined to sleep and deal with this rationally in the morning. But sleep proved elusive. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw his mother's handwriting, heard her voice, remembered the warmth of the Oak Street Center's community kitchen, the smell of soup simmering, the sound of his mother's laugh. Ethan lay in his king-sized bed, surrounded by expensive sheets and crushing silence, completely awake. The letters waited in the other room, carrying whispers from the past he'd tried so hard to forget. The morning brought no relief from the weather. A persistent drizzle painted the city in shades of grey, droplets streaking down the floor-to-ceiling windows of Hale Development's lobby. The gloomy light cast long shadows across the marble floors, matching Ethan's mood perfectly as he stood at his usual spot, reviewing reports on his tablet. The numbers and projections blurred together after his restless night, but he forced himself to focus, tapping through spreadsheets with practiced efficiency when movement at the entrance caught his eye. Amaya Brooks walked through the revolving doors, looking just as drenched as she had yesterday. Her dark hair clung to her face in wet tendrils, and her practical jacket was several shades darker from the rain, water dripping onto the immaculate floor beneath her. This time, though, she walked with purpose rather than exhaustion, her shoulders squared and her chin lifted with quiet determination. The security guard at the front desk gave her a curious look, but she moved past him before he could intervene. "Mr. Hale," she called out, her voice carrying across the marble floor, clear and confident despite the corporate grandeur surrounding her. "I wanted to make sure you got the letters okay." Her eyes held a genuine concern that seemed out of place in the sterile lobby. Ethan's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping along his temple. He'd barely managed 2 hours of sleep, his mother's handwriting dancing behind his closed eyes all night. The familiar loops and curves had haunted him, bringing back memories he'd carefully packed away years ago. "Mrs. Brooks, I appreciate your concern, but as you can see, I'm quite busy." He gestured vaguely at his tablet, hoping she would take the hint. She approached anyway, leaving small, wet footprints on the polished floor that marked her path like breadcrumbs. A few employees glanced their way, curious about the soggy visitor confronting their notoriously unapproachable CEO. "I know you're busy. I just needed to tell you something about the Oak Street Center." Her voice softened, but the intensity in her eyes remained unchanged. "The development project is proceeding as scheduled," he said automatically, the words feeling hollow even to his own ears. They were the same words he'd repeated in board meetings and press releases, but standing here facing this woman, they sounded rehearsed and empty. "Did you know your mother used to volunteer there?" Amaya's voice was gentle but firm, cutting through his corporate shield with unexpected precision. "She ran the community kitchen every Wednesday, made the best chicken soup I've ever tasted. People would line up an hour early just to get a bowl and talk with her." Ethan's fingers gripped his tablet harder, the protective case creaking slightly under the pressure. A memory surfaced, steam rising from a huge pot, his mother's laugh as she added, just a pinch more, of something that made the whole kitchen smell like home. "That was a long time ago. The area needs revitalization." The words felt like ashes in his mouth. "Revitalization doesn't have to mean destruction," Amaya said. She pushed her wet hair back from her face, revealing eyes that held no anger, just a steady, unwavering belief. "I volunteer there now. 3 days a week we serve meals to anyone who needs them, just like your mother did. Last week we had a family who'd just lost their apartment. The children had that look, you know? That lost, scared look. But after an hour at our table they were laughing. That's what the center does. It restores people, not just buildings." The memory of warm soup and his mother's smile flashed unbidden through Ethan's mind, more vivid than before. He could almost taste the rich broth, feel the wooden spoon in his small hand as she taught him to stir gently so the vegetables don't break. He pushed the memory away with practiced discipline. "The contents of those letters are personal, Ms. Brooks. They won't affect business decisions." He straightened his shoulders, retreating behind professionalism. "Everything's personal, Mr. Hale. That's what your mother always said." Amaya's eyes held his steadily, unafraid of his power or position. She believed that every business decision was really about people, about how we choose to treat each other when money and property are on the line. She taught me that kindness isn't weakness, it's the hardest strength there is. Security approached, responding to Ethan's subtle hand signal. 2 men in dark suits moved with practiced smoothness across the lobby. "Thank you for your time, Ms. Brooks. Please excuse me." Ethan nodded curtly, already turning toward the elevator bank. He turned away, hearing the security guard's polite but firm requests for her to leave. Her words followed him to the elevator. "Just read the letters, Mr. Hale. Really read them. She wrote them for a reason." The elevator doors closed on her final plea, sealing Ethan back into his controlled world of numbers and projections. The day dragged on in a blur of meetings and phone calls. Ethan found himself staring at the development plans for Oak Street, seeing not the projected profit margins, but phantom images of a younger version of himself sitting at worn wooden tables. The architect's rendering of sleek condominiums superimposed over the old brick building felt wrong somehow, like drawing sunglasses on a family photograph. In the middle of the budget review, he caught himself wondering if Mrs. Chen still worked in the kitchen, or if the old piano in the corner still went out of tune every winter. That evening, in his apartment, he opened the box again. Rain streaked down the windows of his penthouse, the city lights blurring into watercolor smudges far below. The first letter lay on top, slightly wrinkled from his handling the night before. He smoothed it carefully with his palm, feeling the texture of the paper, and continued reading where he'd stopped, settling into his leather chair. "The center taught me something important, Ethan." His mother's words flowed across the page in that familiar handwriting that had signed his school permission slips and written notes in his lunchbox. "When you have little, you learn to promise small but keep it big. I promised Mrs. Chen I'd help in the kitchen once a week. That small promise turned into 15 years of Wednesday meals, countless friendships, and a community that carried us through our darkest times. It was there I learned that the measure of wealth isn't what you have, but what you give when you have very little." Ethan's phone buzzed with messages about tomorrow's demolition. Schedule. Red dots multiplied in the corner of his screen. Urgent requests, confirmations needed, paperwork waiting for his signature to bring the bulldozers in at dawn. His mother's letter continued. "Remember how you used to help me carry groceries there? Such a serious little boy, insisting on carrying the heaviest bags, even when they made you tip sideways like a little sailboat in the wind. You learned to count by sorting cans, learned fractions by measuring ingredients. The center wasn't just a building, it was our classroom, our dining room, our family room. And how Mr. Jacobs taught you chess on that old set with the missing knight. You were so proud when you finally beat him, though now I suspect he let you win." The memory hit Ethan with physical force. The chipped black knight replaced by a button. The way Mr. Jacobs had stroked his white beard while considering his moves. The taste of hot chocolate with tiny marshmallows floating on top. He'd forgotten all of it, or thought he had. The final paragraph caught his breath. "Promise small, keep it big. That's all I ask of you, my son. Start with one small yes, and let God grow it into something beautiful. The world has enough people who know how to acquire things. Be someone who knows how to give them away with grace." Ethan set the letter down and picked up his phone. His fingers hovered over the keypad for a long moment before he began typing, each word deliberate and measured against the weight of his mother's request. 2. Executive Board, subject, Oak Street Development, immediate 48-hour hold on demolition for additional project review required. Stand by for updates. EH. Seconds later, his phone exploded with notifications. Board members demanding explanations. Project managers scrambling to adjust schedules. Contractors asking about compensation for delays. The calm, ordered world he'd built was suddenly churning with questions he couldn't answer yet. Ethan ignored them all, his eyes drawn back to his mother's handwriting. "Promise small, keep it big." He didn't know what he was doing, but for the first time in 20 years, he was listening to his mother's voice again. It felt terrifying and right all at once, like stepping off a cliff and finding solid ground beneath his feet. The rain outside had finally stopped. In its place, a heavy silence filled his apartment, broken only by the continuous buzz of his phone and the whisper of paper as he carefully returned the letter to its envelope. He had no plan yet, only a borrowed courage from ink on paper and a stranger with wet footprints who had refused to be dismissed. The headline splashed across Ethan's tablet screen during his morning coffee. "Cold CEO shows a heart. Hail development delays. Oak Street demolition." Below it, a grainy photo showed him in profile, staring pensively through his office window. The article painted him as a mysterious figure wrestling with conscience, complete with quotes from anonymous sources, speculating about his sudden change of heart. The writer had somehow managed to make a simple business decision sound like a dramatic moral epiphany. Ethan grimaced and set the tablet down harder than necessary, the ceramic mug beside it rattling in protest. His phone hadn't stopped buzzing since last night's email. The board wanted answers, their messages growing increasingly demanding with each passing hour. Contractors demanded clarity about revised timelines and compensation for delays. His PR team begged for direction, desperate to control the unexpected narrative before it spiraled further. A soft knock at his office door made him look up from the chaos of notifications. His assistant stood there, looking apologetic, her clipboard clutched tightly against her chest like a shield. "Sir, Amaya Brooks is here. She doesn't have an appointment, but—" She hesitated, clearly expecting him to dismiss the unexpected visitor. "Send her in," Ethan said, surprising himself as much as his assistant, whose eyebrows shot up before she quickly schooled her expression back to professional neutrality. Amaya entered carrying a worn manila envelope, its edges softened by what looked like years of handling. Today she was dry, wearing a simple blue sweater and jeans instead of yesterday's rain-soaked outfit. Her hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, revealing warm brown eyes that scanned his office with quiet curiosity. "Thank you for seeing me, Mr. Hale. I brought something to show you," she said, her voice gentle but purposeful. She spread photographs across his desk, careful not to disturb his precisely arranged papers. They were candid shots, nothing professional, children playing chess on weathered tables, their faces scrunched in concentration. Veterans gathered around steaming coffee cups, sharing stories with hands that gestured animatedly. Teenagers helping elderly residents with computer screens, patience evident in their bent postures. "This is what the center does," Amaya said softly. "Every day. Not just occasionally or when there's a special event. This happens Monday through Sunday, rain or shine." Ethan picked up one photo, drawn to it without quite knowing why. A young boy, maybe 7, concentrated fiercely on a chess move, his small finger hovering over a knight. Across from him, an older man in a veteran's cap watched with gentle amusement, crow's feet deepening around his eyes. "That's Marcus," Amaya explained, a warmth entering her voice. "He comes every day after school while his mum works double shifts at the hospital. She's a single parent doing her best. Mr. Rodriguez there teaches chess to anyone willing to learn. He says it builds strategic thinking and patience, skills these kids need for life, not just games." Chess. Ethan couldn't hide his surprise. The development reports had listed the center as providing basic community services, with no specifics that would suggest anything as structured as chess programs. Amaya smiled, the expression lighting her entire face. "They have this thing, they say. Kings don't quit. It started as advice about the chess piece, but turned into something bigger. It's become kind of a motto for the whole center. When life gets tough, kings don't quit." She paused, studying his face for a reaction. Would you like to see for yourself? The real center, not just pictures?" The word no formed automatically on Ethan's tongue. He had meetings stacked back to back for the rest of the day. Reports that needed reviewing before tomorrow's deadline. Damage control from this morning's headlines that required immediate attention. "Yes," he heard himself say instead, the single word feeling foreign in his mouth. 2 hours later, Ethan's driver pulled up outside the Oak Street Center. The building was exactly as the development reports described. Old brick with faded mortar, worn steps with a slight tilt, desperately in need of repairs on the sagging gutters and peeling window frames. But something the reports hadn't captured was the life buzzing around it, the unmistakable energy of a place that mattered deeply to people. Children's laughter spilled from open windows like music. Actual music, someone playing guitar, drifted from somewhere inside. The rich smell of cooking filled the air, something with spices that made his stomach rumble despite his expensive business lunch. Amaya led him through the front door, past walls covered in children's artwork and community announcements. Handwritten signs advertised everything from ESL classes to job interview preparation sessions. People nodded hello as they passed, some doing double takes at his presence in his tailored suit and polished shoes. A few kids pointed and whispered, their eyes wide as they recognized him from billboards around the city. "Mr. Hale!" A small voice called out above the general hum of activity. "Are you really the king of the glass tower downtown?" Ethan turned to find a young boy, Marcus from the photo, grinning up at him with a missing front tooth. Behind the child, Mr. Rodriguez chuckled from his chess table, his weathered hands resting on a board already set up for a game. "I'm not a king," Ethan said carefully, uncertain how to address a child. "I just work there. It's an office building, not a castle." "Want to play chess?" Marcus asked, undeterred by the correction. His small hand patted the empty chair across from his. "I bet I can beat you. I'm really good." "Marcus." Amaya started with gentle warning in her tone. "Mr. Hale probably has to get back to work soon." But Ethan was already loosening his tie, sliding it down an inch from his collar as he moved towards the table. Something about the boy's confident challenge triggered a competitive spark he hadn't felt in years. "Challenge accepted," he said, settling into the too small chair that creaked under his weight. The game drew a small crowd, people drifting over with curious expressions to watch the suited businessman face off against their young champion. Marcus proved to be a shrewd opponent, clearly well taught by Mr. Rodriguez. He considered each move carefully, occasionally glancing up at Ethan with narrowed eyes of concentration. When the boy's knight trapped Ethan's king in a surprise maneuver, the gathered spectators erupted in cheers and gentle applause. "Kings don't quit," Marcus declared with pride beaming from his face, offering his small hand to shake. "But sometimes they have to know when they're beaten. Want a rematch? I can teach you some tricks." Ethan found himself laughing, really laughing, for the first time in what felt like years. The sound surprised him, rusty but genuine. "Maybe next time, champion. Well played. You've got quite a future ahead of you." As the afternoon wound down, with Ethan having met more center regulars than he could possibly remember, Amaya walked him back to his waiting car. The driver stood at attention, opening the door as they approached. "Thank you for coming," she said simply, her eyes meeting his directly. "It means a lot that you took the time to see this place for yourself, to meet the people behind the statistics in those development reports." Ethan nodded, unsure how to express the tumult of emotions the visit had stirred up. Memories of his own childhood, of his mother's small but significant kindnesses, swirled uncomfortably close to the surface. "I'll be in touch," he managed, the words feeling inadequate. The drive home was quiet, the usual city traffic moving around them in slow waves. His phone buzzed repeatedly, but his usual stream of work calls felt distant, less urgent than they had that morning. When he entered his apartment, the box of letters sat waiting on his kitchen counter where he'd left it, a silent reminder of unfinished business. Another envelope peeked out from beneath the first, still unopened, its aged paper carrying secrets he hadn't yet faced. He stared at it for a long moment, chess moves and children's laughter still echoing in his mind. The faces from the center, Marcus, Mr. Rodriguez, the elderly woman who'd thanked him for stopping by with tears in her eyes, seemed to watch him from the corners of his immaculate apartment. Then, with careful fingers, he reached for the second letter, something in his chest both tightening and releasing at the same time. The city lights twinkled through Ethan's floor-to-ceiling windows as he settled into his leather armchair. The second letter sat unopened on his lap, its worn edges catching the dim light. His fingers traced the familiar handwriting that spelled his name. With a deep breath, he broke the seal. "My dearest Ethan," the letter began. "Tonight, as I write this, I'm thinking about our first visit to Oak Street. You were so small then, barely reaching the table's edge. Do you remember? It was just after your father left, and pride had kept me from asking for help until we had nothing left in the cupboards." Ethan's throat tightened. He shifted in his chair, the leather creaking beneath him. The volunteers didn't just feed us that day. His mother's words continued. They fed our hope. Mrs. Chen gave you extra dumplings because you said they were like little clouds. Mr. Wilson slipped an apple into your pocket and winked like it was our secret. And you, my serious little boy, smiled for the first time in weeks. The paper trembled slightly in his hands. Try as he might, Ethan couldn't summon these memories. They felt like scenes from someone else's life. I made a promise that day, Ruth wrote, that I would return their kindness tenfold. For 15 years, I cooked at that same table where we first ate. I watched other mothers bring their children, saw the same relief in their eyes that I once felt. If you ever grow powerful, remember to protect what once fed you. Some debts can't be measured in dollars, my son. Ethan set the letter down, running a hand over his face. The word powerful seemed to mock him. He had built an empire of glass and steel, but here was his mother asking him to protect a crumbling building and its mismatched furniture. Sleep proved elusive that night. Morning brought a stark reminder of reality. Greg Stanton, his CFO, burst into his office without knocking, waving a stack of papers. Have you lost your mind? Greg's usually perfectly combed hair was disheveled. The contractors are threatening to sue for breach of contract. The investors are panicking. This delay could cost us millions. Ethan held up a hand. It's 48 hours, Greg. Not a lifetime. 48 hours is an eternity in this market. Greg dropped the papers on Ethan's desk. Look at these numbers. Every day we delay, the profit margins shrink, not to mention the PR nightmare. Since when does Ethan Hale cave to community pressure? The word stung more than Ethan wanted to admit. I'm not caving. I'm reviewing. Reviewing what? We've been over every inch of this deal for months. Greg's voice lowered. Is this about those letters? The ones that woman brought? Ethan's jaw tightened. That's personal. Nothing's personal when it risks $30 million in investments. Greg straightened his tie. Whatever's in those letters, don't let it cloud your judgment. You built this company on smart decisions, not sentiment. After Greg left, Ethan sat at his computer. His fingers hovered over the keyboard before typing Oak Street Center Historical Records. The company database yielded decades of property assessments, tax records, and community reports. But it was the photo archive that caught his eye. Hundreds of pictures documented the center's history. Holiday celebrations, community meetings, daily meals. He scrolled through them mechanically until one image made him freeze. The timestamp read, December 1992. A Christmas tree stood in the corner, draped with paper chains. At one of the long tables sat a woman with warm eyes and a gentle smile, his mother, Ruth Hale. Beside her was a small boy, dark-haired and solemn, eating from a steaming bowl. Ethan stared at his younger self, trying to reconcile this image with his memory. The boy in the photo looked safe, content even. How had he forgotten this? When had the Oak Street Center transformed from sanctuary to liability in his mind? More photos followed. Ruth serving meals, Ruth decorating for holidays, Ruth teaching other volunteers her famous apple pie recipe. Year after year, her presence was woven through the center's history like a golden thread. Some debts can't be measured in dollars, she had written. Now he understood. This wasn't just about a building or a development deal. This was his mother's legacy, the dream she had built one meal at a time. And he was about to tear it down. The realization hit him with physical force, making him lean back in his chair. All his carefully constructed plans, the projected profits, the sleek architectural renderings, they felt hollow now, stripped of their shine by the weight of these discovered memories. His phone buzzed, another message from Greg about urgent meetings and pending decisions. Ethan let it ring, his eyes fixed on the photo of his younger self, safe at his mother's side, in the very place he had marked for destruction. The night wrapped around Ethan's car like a thick blanket as he drove through the quiet streets. His headlights cut through a light drizzle, illuminating empty sidewalks and closed storefronts. He hadn't planned to come here, hadn't even changed out of his suit, but sleep seemed impossible with his thoughts churning. The Oak Street Center glowed softly in the darkness. Yellow light spilled from its windows, creating warm squares on the wet pavement. Ethan parked his luxury sedan a block away, feeling oddly self-conscious about its shine against the weathered neighborhood. As he walked closer, voices drifted through the old building's walls, young voices mixed with laughter. He paused near a window, drawn by the sound of Amaya's voice rising above the others. "Sometimes life feels like one big storm, doesn't it?" she was saying. "Like today, rain, wind, everything grey. But you know what? Storms teach us something important." "That umbrellas are awesome!" a child called out, triggering giggles. "Well, yes," Amaya laughed. "But also that we're stronger than we think. Each of you has a special purpose, especially when, things get stormy." Ethan moved closer to the window, oddly captivated. Inside, he could see about a dozen children seated in a circle. Some looked as young as 8, others closer to their teens. All of them focused on Amaya as she sat cross-legged on the floor with them, her hands moving expressively as she spoke. Suddenly, the lights flickered. Several children gasped. "Oh." One small voice quavered. "Is the power going out?" "Hey, no worries." Amaya's voice stayed cheerful. "Remember what we just said about storms? Besides, I've got emergency flashlights and, wait for it, glow sticks! Who doesn't love glow sticks?" The nervous energy in the room transformed into excited chatter. Ethan found himself smiling, despite his heavy thoughts. The lights steadied, but Amaya was already pulling out a package of glow sticks, cracking them to life with practiced ease. "Mr. Hale?" He startled. Amaya stood in the doorway now, holding a bright green glow stick. "I didn't mean to interrupt," he said stiffly. "You're not interrupting. Would you like to come in? We're having hot cocoa after the session." Her smile was warm, genuine. Fair warning, it's the instant kind with tiny marshmallows. Before he could form a polite refusal, one of the children spotted him. "Hey, it's the chess guy. Did you come back for a rematch?" Several eager faces turned towards the door. Ethan felt trapped between his instinct to retreat and the hopeful looks directed his way. "I suppose I could stay for a few minutes." The room smelled of chocolate and rain-damp coats. Children clustered around a small table where Amaya prepared cups of cocoa, adding extra marshmallows with a conspiratorial wink to each kid. Ethan stood awkwardly until she handed him a steaming mug. "You can sit with me," she offered, gesturing to a quiet corner as the children returned to their activities. "Unless you'd prefer another chess match." "The cocoa is fine," he said quickly, earning a knowing smile. They sat in mismatched chairs, the kind of worn furniture his company would certainly condemn. Yet somehow, holding the warm mug in this shabby corner felt more real than his elegant office. "Rough night?" Amaya asked softly. Ethan studied his cocoa. "Just thinking." "About the center?" "About promises." The words slipped out before he could stop them. "The ones people make, the ones they break." Amaya was quiet for a moment, watching the children play. "That must have been hard, losing your mother so young." "She didn't break her promises," Ethan said sharply. "She just couldn't keep them anymore. There's a difference." "I know." Amaya's voice held no pity, just understanding. "Is that why you don't trust promises now? Because you've seen too many broken ones?" The question hit uncomfortably close to home. Ethan took a sip of cocoa to avoid answering immediately. "In business, promises are contracts, clear terms, defined consequences. And in life. Life is messier. Amaya nodded. That's why we need each other. No one can keep every promise alone. She looked at him directly. Maybe you've been keeping them alone for too long. The words settled in his chest like a weight. Before he could respond, a small commotion broke out across the room. Someone had spilled their cocoa. Amaya excused herself to help clean up, leaving Ethan with his thoughts and a half-empty mug. He watched her calm the upset child, turning the mishap into a lesson about accidents happening to everyone. Other children pitched in to help clean, turning a potential crisis into a moment of community. It was skillfully done, he realized, like his mother would have done. The thought made his chest tight. He stood, placing his mug carefully on a side table. I should go. Amaya looked up from the cleaning effort. Thank you for staying, even for a little while. Thank you for the cocoa. He hesitated. And the conversation. As he walked back to his car, the center's warmth faded behind him, but Amaya's words echoed in his mind. Maybe you've been keeping them alone for too long. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets glossy with reflection. Each puddle seemed to mirror back the question he couldn't shake. How many promises had he refused to make, just to avoid breaking them? Ethan arrived at his office before sunrise, his mind racing with numbers and possibilities. The city map spread across his desk, covered in sticky notes and sketched alternatives. Coffee grew cold beside him as he worked, calculating costs and reviewing zoning regulations. Sarah, his assistant, found him surrounded by papers when she arrived. Sir, your 8 o'clock cancelled. Good, I need the time. He didn't look up from his calculator. Get me the property values for Maple Heights, 2 blocks east. The empty lot. Sarah frowned. But we rejected that site months ago. Things change. Ethan finally glanced up. And get Stanton in here. Now. Greg Stanton arrived 15 minutes later, looking concerned. What's the emergency? Ethan gestured to the plans. We're moving the luxury condos to Maple Heights. Oak Street Center stays where it is. You're joking. Stanton's face reddened. That lot's 15% smaller. So we'll build up, not out. Redesign for height. The foundation costs alone will be offset by reduced demolition expenses. Ethan handed him a spreadsheet. And we'll convert Oak Street into a charitable foundation under Hale Development. Stanton slammed the papers down. This is insane. The board will never... The board, Ethan cut in, cares about profits and public image. This gives them both. He pulled up a draft press release. Think about it. Hale Development preserves historic community center. That's better PR than fighting protesters when we demolish it. Since when do you care about PR? Stanton demanded. Or community centers? Since I remembered why we succeed. Ethan's voice hardened. Because this city trusts us. Maybe it's time we earned that trust. The argument lasted another hour. Stanton threw every financial obstacle he could think of at the plan, but Ethan had done his homework. For every problem, he had a solution ready. Finally, Stanton slumped in his chair. You're really serious about this? Dead serious. Ethan pulled out the final drawings. The foundation will need renovation work, but the bones are good. We can make this work. It'll eat into our margins. Not as much as you think. Ethan allowed, himself a small smile. Tax benefits of charitable foundations are substantial. The board meeting that afternoon felt tense. Ethan stood before the projector, aware of every skeptical face around the table. He'd stripped his presentation down to pure numbers. No emotion, no appeals to conscience. Just cold, hard business sense. The Maple Heights location offers superior views, he concluded, and the foundation conversion creates lasting community goodwill. Our projections show increased property values across both sites within 5 years. Silence fell. Chairman Wilson cleared his throat. This is unexpected, Ethan, but not unwise, added Patricia Chen, their marketing director. The PR benefits alone could be significant, especially after those recent protests. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. Stanton, to Ethan's surprise, spoke up. The numbers work. It's unconventional but viable. More discussion followed, but Ethan could feel the mood shifting. When the vote came, approval passed with a comfortable margin. Well done, Wilson said afterward, shaking Ethan's hand. Though I hope you know what you're getting into with this foundation business. Ethan nodded, already reaching for his phone. He had another conversation to handle, one that mattered more than any board approval. He found Amaya at the center, helping a veteran with paperwork. She looked up as he entered, her expression guarded but hopeful. Do you have a minute? He asked. They stepped into the small office she used. Children's artwork covered one wall, while the other held a board full of community notices and sign-up sheets. The board meeting just ended, he began. Amaya's hands twisted together. And? We're not demolishing the center. He watched her eyes widen. Instead, we're converting it into a charitable foundation, full renovation, expanded programs, proper funding. You're serious? Her voice shook. Completely. The luxury development is moving 2 blocks east. He pulled out the preliminary plans. We'll need to coordinate with your current programs during renovation, but... He didn't finish, because Amaya had thrown her arms around him in a fierce hug. Startled, he stood frozen for a moment before awkwardly patting her back. She stepped back, wiping her eyes. Sorry, You're saving more than a building, you know? You're saving hope for so many people. Well, he said gruffly, uncomfortable with her tears. It's good business sense, too. Of course it is. She smiled knowingly. So, what's next? Actually, he cleared his throat. I was thinking we could start with a community cleanup this Saturday. Show everyone this isn't just talk. A cleanup? Her face lit up. That's perfect. I can get volunteers from the youth program, and there's a veterans group that would love to help. They spent the next hour planning, Amaya's enthusiasm infectious. For the first time since finding his mother's letters, Ethan felt something like peace, maybe even excitement. Oh, Amaya exclaimed, checking her watch. I need to get back. We're having a tutoring session in 5 minutes. Right, of course. Ethan gathered his papers. I'll have my office send over the preliminary paperwork tomorrow. At the door, Amaya touched his arm. Thank you, Ethan. Really. He nodded, not trusting himself to speak. As he walked to his car, he heard laughter from inside the center, children arriving for their lessons. The sound followed him, not as an accusation now, but as a promise of something new beginning. The morning sun painted Oak Street in warm gold, chasing away the last traces of the week's storms. By 8 o'clock, the sidewalks buzzed with activity as volunteers arrived carrying paint cans, toolboxes, and enough donuts to feed an army. Amaya stood on the center's front steps, clipboard in hand, greeting everyone with a smile that could rival the sunshine. She wore old jeans splattered with paint from previous projects and a faded T-shirt that read, Community Strong. The veterans group is taking the windows, she called out, directing traffic with cheerful efficiency. Youth team, you've got the walls. And remember, drop cloths everywhere. Children darted around like excited puppies, their energy infectious. Some wore oversized T-shirts as makeshift painting smocks, while others had already managed to get paint on their faces despite not having opened a single can yet. At 9:15, a sleek black car pulled up. Ethan stepped out wearing jeans and a plain grey T-shirt, probably the most casual outfit he owned. A ripple of whispers and giggles spread through the younger volunteers. Mr. CEO came dressed like a regular person, one boy shouted, causing more laughter. Ethan walked up, looking slightly uncomfortable but determined. Where do you need me? Amaya's eyes sparkled with amusement. The painting crew could use another pair of hands. Look at those hands. A girl named Jenny pointed at Ethan's immaculate fingers. They've never seen a paintbrush in their life. CEO hands. Another child chimed in, and soon they were all chanting it, their faces bright with mischief. Ethan held up his hands in surrender. Guilty as charged, but I'm willing to learn. Then come on. Jenny grabbed his wrist, pulling him towards the wall. We'll teach you everything you need to know about being normal. For the next hour, Ethan learned the finer points of wall painting from a group of pre-teens who took their teaching duties very seriously. They showed him how to roll the paint evenly, how to avoid drips, and most importantly, according to them, how to get paint on his clothes like a proper painter. Around 10:30, an elderly woman approached, watching Ethan work with keen interest. Her silver hair was neatly pinned back, and despite the casual nature of the day, she wore a pressed blouse and slacks. "Well, if it isn't little Ethan Hale," she said, her voice warm with recognition. Ethan turned, paint roller in hand. "I'm sorry, do we—" "Mrs. Delaney," she introduced herself. "I was a nurse here when you were knee-high to a grasshopper. Used to help your mother at the meal service." Something flickered in Ethan's eyes. "You knew my mother?" "Oh yes, Ruth was a special soul." Mrs. Delaney reached into her large purse. "In fact, I've got something you might want to see." She pulled out an old photo album, its corners worn soft with age. Amaya, noticing the conversation, drifted closer as Mrs. Delaney carefully turned the pages. "Here we are," she said, pointing to a photograph that had yellowed slightly with time. Ethan leaned in, and his breath caught audibly. In the picture, a small boy sat at a table, spoon halfway to his mouth, looking up at the camera with surprised eyes. Beside him, Ruth Hale smiled warmly, her hand resting on his shoulder. A bowl of steaming stew sat before them both. "That was your first visit here," Mrs. Delaney explained softly. "Your mother had just lost her job at the factory. She was so worried about asking for help, but we convinced her everyone needs a hand sometimes." Ethan touched the photo gently, leaving a faint smudge of paint on the plastic sleeve. I can't remember this." "You were only 4, Mrs. Delaney said, "but you came back nearly every day for almost a year. Ruth insisted on volunteering once she got back on her feet, said she needed to give back what was given to her." The children had gone quiet, watching their usually composed CEO stare at the old photograph. Ethan's throat worked silently as he struggled to find words. Amaya appeared at his side, quietly offering him a clean paint rag. He took it, pretending to wipe paint from his hands while discreetly dabbing at his eyes. "Would you like to keep this?" Mrs. Delaney asked, carefully removing the photo from its sleeve. Ethan nodded, not trusting his voice. He tucked the picture into his back pocket, then picked up his paint roller with renewed purpose. The rest of the day passed in a blur of activity. By sunset, the center's walls gleamed with fresh paint, the windows sparkled, and tired volunteers sat on the steps eating pizza and sharing stories. Ethan slipped away early, driving home in silence. In his apartment, he pulled out the box of letters and the newly acquired photograph. Setting the picture propped against a lamp, he began reading each letter again, his mother's words taking on new meaning. "Remember the taste of that stew?" One letter read, "How warm it felt in your belly. That's what giving feels like, son. Warm right down to your soul." Another spoke of community. "We were never alone at Oak Street. Even when we had nothing, we had each other. That's worth more than gold." Letter after letter, Ruth's voice seemed to fill the room. Ethan read until his eyes burned, until the city lights dimmed outside his windows, until each word was etched into his heart like a promise. waiting to be kept. Back in his apartment that evening, Ethan emptied the box of letters onto his coffee table, organizing them carefully. As he lifted the last envelope, something caught his eye, a cream-colored corner peeking from beneath the box's worn bottom panel. His heart quickened as he carefully pried up the loose cardboard. There, hidden away, lay one final letter. The paper was pristine compared to the others, as if it had been waiting, protected, for this exact moment. His mother's elegant handwriting flowed across the envelope. "For when you're ready to build again." Ethan's hands trembled slightly as he opened it. "My dearest Ethan," the letter began, "if you're reading this, you found your way back to Oak Street, back to where we learned that promises aren't just words. They're built brick by brick, day by day, one small act of faith at a time. Remember how you used to watch the construction workers across the street? You'd sit for hours, fascinated by how they turned piles of bricks into homes. 'Mama,' you'd say, 'they're building promises.' You were right, though you didn't know it then. Every wall we build can either shut people out or shelter them. Every foundation we lay can either divide or unite. You have your father's head for business, but you have my heart for people, even if you've hidden it away for safekeeping. Build your promises brick by brick, my son. Make them strong enough to shelter others. Make them tall enough to reach for heaven. But most importantly, make them wide enough to let love in. With eternal faith in you, Mom." Ethan sat in silence for a long moment, the letter cool against his fingertips. Then he reached for his phone. "Sarah," he said when his assistant answered, "schedule a press conference for tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. sharp, and get me the numbers on our discretionary fund." He worked through the night, running calculations, drafting proposals, and making calls to his financial team. By morning, dark circles shadowed his eyes, but energy hummed through his veins. The press gathered in the lobby of Hale Development, murmuring amongst themselves. Ethan stood at the podium, Amaya beside him, her presence steady and encouraging. 25 years ago, he began, his voice clear and strong. A single mother and her son found shelter at the Oak Street Center. Today, that son is announcing a $5 million endowment to ensure other families will always find the same hope we did. The room erupted in gasps and camera flashes. The Ruth Hale Foundation will provide sustainable funding for programs, maintenance, and expansion of services. Additionally, we're hosting a grand reopening festival next week to celebrate our community's resilience and future. Questions flew from all directions. Ethan handled them with unprecedented warmth, even cracking a few jokes. Social media exploded with clips of his speech, headlines declaring, "Cold CEO thaws, hearts grow 3 sizes on Oak Street," and "Business Titan trades, profit for purpose." After the conference, Ethan loosened his tie and turned to Amaya. "Hungry?" She grinned. "Starving. But no fancy restaurants, I know just the place." They ended up at a row of food trucks parked along the riverfront. Amaya led him to a bright yellow truck with Big Al's Street Eats painted in red letters. "Trust me," she said, ordering for both of them. They found a bench overlooking the water, sharing loaded fries and talking about festival plans. Ethan couldn't remember the last time he'd eaten with his fingers or laughed so freely. "Oh, you have to try this." Amaya jumped up and jogged to another truck, returning with a paper plate piled high with golden powdered sugar-dusted squiggles. "What is that?" Ethan eyed it suspiciously. "Funnel cake. Don't tell me you've never had funnel cake." "I usually stick to protein bars." Amaya's mock horror made him laugh. "That's just sad. Here." She tore off a piece and held it out. Ethan hesitated, then took the bite. Warm sweetness melted on his tongue. "Okay, you win. This is amazing." "See?" Sometimes the best things in life come from food trucks. They shared the rest of the funnel cake, talking about everything and nothing. Ethan found himself telling her about his childhood memories of watching construction sites, and she shared stories about the center's kids and their dreams. A soft patter of rain began to fall, warm drops creating rings on the river's surface. Other people rushed for cover, but they lingered, watching the sky. "We should probably head back," Amaya said reluctantly. Ethan pulled out his umbrella. He'd started carrying one daily since meeting her in the storm. "Let me walk you to your car." They strolled slowly through the light rain, shoulders almost touching beneath the umbrella's shelter. The city seemed softer somehow, its hard edges blurred by rain and possibility. At her car, Amaya turned to face him. "Thank you for today, for everything." "I should be thanking you," Ethan said quietly, "for delivering more than just letters." Tuesday morning dawned grey and cold, the kind of winter day that seeps into your bones. Ethan sat at his desk reviewing renovation estimates for the Oak Street Center, the numbers blurring together after hours of concentration. The steam from his third cup of coffee had long since disappeared when Greg Stanton burst through his office door, face flushed an alarming shade of red, his breathing heavy as though he'd sprinted up the stairs rather than taking the executive elevator. "You need to see this." Stanton slapped a thick contract on Ethan's desk, the thud echoing in the quiet office. His finger jabbed at a specific section. "Page 47, section 6. Read it now." Ethan's brow furrowed as he flipped to the marked page, scanning the dense legal text with growing unease. The words seemed to leap off the page, each one landing like a physical blow. His stomach twisted into a tight knot as he read the clause buried in the fine print of their land swap agreement, a clause he'd somehow missed during the initial review. A $10 million penalty. Ethan's voice was tight, his throat suddenly dry as sandpaper. For any significant deviation from the original development plan, how could this have slipped past us? The hedge fund that backed the deal included it as insurance. Stanton paced the office like a caged animal, his expensive shoes wearing an invisible path in the plush carpet. It's standard protection for them, but nobody thought it would matter. He stopped, turning to face Ethan with accusing eyes. "Your little charity project doesn't just cost us the luxury condos. It triggers a penalty that could sink the entire company. Do you understand what you've done?" Ethan pressed his fingers to his temples, the beginnings of a splitting headache forming behind his eyes. He could feel his pulse pounding against his fingertips. "Why didn't legal catch this? We have an entire department for exactly this reason." "Because no one expected you to completely abandon a billion-dollar development over some worthless community center." Stanton's voice rose, bouncing off the glass walls of Ethan's corner office. His normally composed demeanor had crumbled entirely. "What happened to you, Ethan? The board trusted your judgment. I trusted your judgment. We've been partners in this for years, and suddenly you're throwing everything away." "We'll find another way," Ethan said firmly, his mind already racing through possible solutions. "Maybe we can restructure the debt, or negotiate with the hedge fund. There has to be a workable compromise." "Another way?" Stanton laughed harshly, the sound lacking any trace of humor. "Our stock is already sliding from the delay announcements. Investors are nervous. Add a 10 million hit to our books, and we'll be in free fall. Projects will collapse. People will lose jobs. Good people with families who depend on us. Then we'll take the hit." Ethan stood, matching Stanton's intensity, his chair rolling back against the window with a soft thud. "We're not reversing course. The Oak Street Center stays." Stanton's eyes narrowed, his voice dropping to a dangerous level. "All this for what? Because some community organizer batted her eyes at you? Because she showed up with convenient letters that pushed all your emotional buttons? I never took you for a man so easily manipulated, Ethan. Leave Amaya out of this, Ethan warned, his voice carrying a rare edge that made even Stanton pause. Stanton's phone buzzed in his pocket. He glanced at it, his expression shifting from anger to something more calculating. Too late for that. You should check Business Watch's blog. Right now. A cold feeling of dread washed over Ethan as he pulled up the site on his computer. His blood ran cold as he read the headline emblazoned across the screen. Oak Street charity stunt, CEO manipulated by fake letters. The anonymous post detailed supposed evidence that the letters were forged, complete with doctored screenshots showing Amaya discussing media strategy with local reporters. One image showed what appeared to be text messages where she mentioned researching Ethan's background. Another showed emails discussing emotional leverage points. The story painted her as an opportunistic activist who had fabricated the letters to emotionally manipulate him into saving the center. This is garbage, Ethan growled, his hands clenching into fists. Those letters are real. I know my mother's handwriting. I'd recognize it anywhere. He scrolled through the article, his anger building with each paragraph. This is a hit piece, nothing more. The board is already calling for an emergency meeting. Stanton moved towards the door, straightening his tie with practiced precision. Face it, Ethan. You got played. The smart move is to shut this down now before the company suffers irreparable damage. We can still salvage the Oak Street project if we act quickly. Get out. Ethan's voice was quiet but razor-sharp. What? I said get out of my office. Ethan's voice was deadly quiet, the kind of calm that precedes a violent storm. And Greg, if I find out you had anything to do with that story. The threat hung unfinished in the air between them. Stanton's face remained carefully blank as he left, closing the door with exaggerated gentleness. The moment he was alone, Ethan's phone exploded with notifications. The story was spreading like wildfire across social media, picking up additional details and speculation with each share. Investors were panicking, demanding statements. The board secretary was requesting his immediate presence. The PR department was flooding his inbox with crisis management proposals. He tried calling Amaya, his fingers fumbling with the screen, but it went straight to voicemail. Amaya, it's Ethan. There's a story circulating. We need to talk. Call me as soon as you get this. His hands shook slightly as he looked at the business blog again. The screenshots looked real, professionally done, even. But something felt off about them. The timing was too perfect, the leak too precisely aimed. Someone wanted to destroy both the center and Amaya's reputation in one strategic blow. 45 minutes later, the board meeting was absolute chaos. Members talked over each other in the sleek conference room, pointing to plunging stock numbers on the wall display and reading aloud angry investor calls. 2 board members were arguing about damage control, while another was already discussing CEO succession planning, not bothering to lower his voice. The chairman finally restored order with 3 sharp raps of his knuckles on the polished mahogany table. Mr. Hale, he said gravely, the lines in his face deeper than Ethan had ever seen them. This situation has spiraled out of control. The board demands an immediate reversal of the Oak Street decision. We cannot afford the financial or reputational damage. No. Ethan's response was simple but firm. This isn't a request. The chairman's voice hardened, his eyes flickering to the other board members for support. The penalty clause alone would devastate our quarterly projections. Add in the PR nightmare brewing, and we're looking at a serious threat to the company's stability. I said no. Ethan stood, placing both hands on the table and leaning forward. Those letters are real. The Oak Street Center is part of this company's history, my history, and I will not abandon it based on an anonymous blog post and some clearly doctored screenshots. Then we'll have no choice but to call a vote of no confidence. The chairman said, the regret in his voice barely masking his resolve. Do what you have to do. Ethan walked to the door, his shoulders squared despite the weight pressing down on them. He paused, hand on the doorknob, then turned back to face the room of stunned executives. But ask yourselves this: when did we decide that profit matters more than people? When did we forget that business can be about building communities, not just buildings? My mother understood that. I thought we did too. He left them in stunned silence, his mind already racing through possibilities and contingencies. He needed to find Amaya immediately. He needed to prove those screenshots were fake. But most of all, he needed to find a way to save both the center and his company, before everything he'd built over years of careful work came crashing down around him. As he strode through the open office area, employees averting their eyes as he passed, he caught sight of Stanton in an empty conference room, speaking intensely on his phone, back turned to the glass wall. Through the door that had been left slightly ajar, Ethan could just make out his words. The story is spreading perfectly. He'll have no choice but to back down now. We'll have control of the situation by end of day. Ethan's fists clenched so tightly his knuckles turned white, a surge of clarity cutting through his turmoil. Now he knew exactly where the leak had come from. But proving it, and stopping this avalanche of disasters before it buried both the center and his career, would take every bit of strength, cunning, and resource he possessed. The elevator doors closed on his determined reflection, jaw set and eyes burning with purpose. The real fight was just beginning, and this time he wouldn't be playing by corporate rules. The rain had returned, heavy and cold, as Ethan's car pulled up to the Oak Street Center. Through sheets of water, he could see Amaya locking up for the night, her shoulders slumped with exhaustion. His headlights caught her attention, and she turned, squinting through the downpour. He stepped out into the rain, not bothering with an umbrella. "Did you do it?" "Do what?" She walked toward him, confusion clear on her face. The letters, the media leak. Was any of it real? His voice cracked. "Tell me the truth, Amaya." Understanding dawned in her eyes, followed by hurt. "You saw the story." She shook her head, rain streaming down her face. "And you actually believe it?" "The screenshots are lies." Her voice rose above the storm. "I would never do that. Never. This place, these people, they're my life, Ethan, not some PR stunt." "Then explain how they got your private messages. Explain how—" "I can't explain what I didn't do." Amaya's eyes flashed. "I wanted to help people, not your headlines. Everything I told you was true. Every moment here was real." Thunder rolled overhead as they stood facing each other, both drenched and shivering. Ethan's phone buzzed, another message from the board. His company was bleeding money by the minute. The penalty clause loomed like a sword over everything he'd built. "I have to protect the company," he said, his voice hollow. "There are thousands of jobs at stake. I can't—" He swallowed hard. "The endowment is withdrawn. The original demolition schedule stands." Amaya staggered as if he'd struck her. "No, you can't. The permits are already reactivated. The crew starts tomorrow. These people trust you now." She grabbed his arm. "The children, the veterans, they believe in you. Your mother believed in you." He jerked away. "Don't talk about my mother, not now. Ethan, please." But he was already walking back to his car, each step feeling like lead. The engine roared to life, drowning out whatever else she might have said. In his rearview mirror, he saw her standing in the rain, a small, broken figure in the growing dark. The drive home was a blur. His penthouse felt colder than usual as he shed his wet clothes and poured himself a drink he didn't really want. The box of letters sat on his desk, mocking him. One final envelope remained unopened. His hands trembled as he picked it up. The paper was thick, preserved by whatever careful soul had kept these messages safe all these years. But as he tried to read the words, they swam before his eyes, blurred by anger and shame he couldn't control. The letter dropped from his fingers. He slumped in his chair, listening to the storm rage outside his windows. Hours ticked by. The sky began to lighten, though the rain never stopped. When exhaustion finally claimed him, his dreams were filled with his mother's disappointed face and Amaya's tears mixing with the rain. Across town, in the Oak Street Center's main room, Amaya knelt alone in the darkness. The space felt different now, heavier, as if the building itself knew its fate. She'd spent hours calling everyone she could think of, searching for legal help, for proof of the screenshot's falsity, for any way to stop what was coming. But in the end, she did what she always did when things seemed impossible. She prayed. "Give me strength," she whispered into the quiet. "Not for me, for them, for this place, for him." Her voice caught. "Please, show us all a better way." The storm's low rumble was her only answer as dawn crept closer, bringing with it the sound of heavy machinery moving into position outside. Morning light crept through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Ethan's penthouse, harsh and unforgiving. His neck ached from sleeping in the chair, and the unopened letter still lay where it had fallen. He forced himself through his morning routine like a robot. Shower, suit, coffee. Each movement felt empty. The drive to Hale Development's headquarters was a blur of grey buildings and brake lights. In the lobby, conversations hushed as he passed. The whispers followed him into the elevator, where two junior associates suddenly found their phones fascinating. His office felt different, colder somehow. Sarah, his assistant, placed a stack of newspapers on his desk without meeting his eyes. Each headline screamed about scandal, deception, and the manufactured charity stunt. He pushed them aside, unable to look at the photos of Amaya they'd splashed across the business section. "Your 9 o'clock called to cancel," Sarah said softly. "And the board wants to meet at 2. Ethan nodded, not trusting his voice. The morning dragged by in a parade of uncomfortable meetings and awkward silences. Around 11, he escaped to the break room, desperate for stronger coffee. "Mr. Hale." The gentle voice made him turn. Mrs. Delaney stood in the doorway, her silver hair neat despite the lingering humidity, her nurse's ID badge still pinned to her cardigan. "This isn't a good time," he said, but his usual authority felt hollow. "I saw the news." She stepped closer, pulling a manila envelope from her bag. "And I know a witch hunt when I see one." Mrs. Delaney. "That girl has spent 5 years serving meals, tutoring children, and sleeping on the center's floor during winter storms so no one freezes." She laid the envelope on the counter. "And I've spent 40 years keeping records. Old habits die hard." Ethan stared at the envelope. "What is this?" "Proof. I may be old, but I know my way around a computer. When that story broke, something felt wrong. So I dug." She tapped the envelope. "Your Mr. Stanton wasn't as clever as he thought. The blog account that leaked those fake screenshots? I traced the email address. He registered it last week." The coffee cup trembled in Ethan's hand. "That's impossible." "Check the timestamps yourself. The registration, the first post, even the doctored images, all created hours after you announced the endowment." She stepped back. "Amaya Brooks may not be rich or powerful, but she's honest. More honest than some people in fancy offices." The old nurse's words hit like physical blows. Ethan's carefully maintained facade began to crack. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because Ruth would have wanted me to." Mrs. Delaney's eyes softened. "She always said you had her heart, even if you tried to hide it." She left him there, the envelope heavy in his hands. He retreated to his office, locked the door, and spent an hour verifying every document she'd brought. Each piece of evidence confirmed her story. a digital trail leading straight to Greg Stanton. The weight of what he'd done, what he'd believed, crushed down on him. Amaya's face in the rain haunted him. The children's trust, the veterans' hope, all shattered because he'd let fear win. With shaking hands, he retrieved his mother's final letter from his briefcase. The paper felt warm, as if it held some of her life still. He broke the seal and began to read. "My dearest Ethan, if you're reading this last letter, you're facing a choice that seems impossible. I know, because that's when I always saved my hardest truths for you. You were so young when we needed help, too young to remember all of it. But you were never too young to understand kindness. Even at 4, you insisted on sharing your meals with other children at the center. They look scared, Mama. You'd say, like me. If you ever turn away kindness because you're scared, turn back before the rain stops. Fear is a liar, my son. It tells you that walls keep you safe, that trust makes you weak, that money matters more than mercy. But I've watched you grow. You have my stubbornness and your father's mind for business. Use them both. Just remember, the biggest promises aren't the ones we speak. They're the ones we keep when keeping them hurts. All my love, Mom." Ethan pressed his palms against his eyes, but he couldn't stop the tears. When he could see clearly again, he picked up his phone. "Get me everything on the Oak Street penalty clause," he ordered the finance department. "Every document, every signature, every date. And I want Stanton's complete audit history for the past year. Now." The files arrived within minutes. As he dug deeper, the truth emerged in stark numbers. Stanton hadn't just leaked fake stories, he'd engineered the entire penalty trap months ago. Hidden accounts, redirected funds, kickbacks from the predatory lender, all designed to profit from either outcome, the luxury condos or the charity's failure. The evidence glowed on his screen, damning and irrefutable. His mother's words echoed in his mind. "Fear is a liar." Ethan's footsteps echoed down the marble hallway of Hale Development's executive floor. His tie was perfectly straight, his suit crisp, but his eyes burned with a fire no one had seen before. Through the glass walls of the main conference room, he could see Stanton gesturing at projected charts, the board members nodding gravely at his emergency recovery measures. Red arrows pointed downward. Crisis headlines flashed across the screen. Ethan didn't knock. He pushed both doors open, the sound making everyone jump. "Mr. Hale?" Stanton recovered smoothly. "We were just discussing the Oak Street situation." "No, Greg, you were lying. Again." Ethan's voice was quiet but carried to every corner. He held up a thick folder. "Like you lied about the penalty clause. Like you lied about Amaya Brooks." Stanton's smile flickered. "I don't know what you mean." "The blog account that leaked those screenshots, registered in your name, the penalty trigger you claimed would bankrupt us, hidden in fine print you added 3 months ago." Ethan tossed copies of Mrs. Delaney's evidence onto the table. "Along with some creative accounting I'm sure the SEC would love to see." Color drained from Stanton's face. Board members reached for the documents, murmuring as they read. "You can't prove—" "Actually, I can." Ethan clicked a button. The screen changed to bank records, transfer dates, emails. "You didn't just leak fake stories. You engineered this whole trap. Hidden accounts, kickbacks from the lender, even a shell company ready to buy Oak Street cheap after the scandal." Someone gasped. Papers rustled as more eyes scanned the proof. "Mr. Stanton," the board chairman said slowly, "is this true?" Stanton's composure cracked. The company was at risk. That Bleeding Heart program would have what? Helped people. Cost us a fraction of what your scheme did. Ethan stepped closer. "You're fired, Greg. Security is waiting outside, and if you fight this, every document goes public." "You can't. I already did." Ethan turned to the board. "I take full responsibility for not catching this sooner. I'm forfeiting my annual bonus to help stabilize our stock, and I'll cover the Oak Street penalty personally. That's $10 million. Someone protested. I'm aware. My penthouse and car collection should cover it. Ethan's voice softened. My mother once served meals at Oak Street. She taught me that real wealth isn't what you keep, it's what you're willing to give when giving hurts. The room fell silent. Then the chairman stood, straightening his jacket. Well said, Mr. Hale. He nodded to security. Please escort Mr. Stanton out. As Stanton was led away, someone started clapping. Others joined in, the applause building until it filled the room. But Ethan barely heard it. Through the windows, he could see reporters gathering, drawn by rumors of the confrontation. He walked out to meet them, cameras flashing in his face. Mr. Hale, is it true about the fraud? What about Oak Street? Why risk your personal fortune? Ethan raised a hand. The questions quieted. 25 years ago, my mother fed me at Oak Street when we had nowhere else to go. His voice carried clearly. I won't starve those kids for profit. Not now, not ever. Phones lifted, recording. Social media exploded with clips of his words, with hashtags about corporate conscience, with stories of Oak Street's impact. Support flooded in from across the city. But Ethan didn't stay to watch his statement go viral. He had promises to keep, and the rain was finally stopping. Local news vans parked outside as security escorted Stanton through the lobby in disgrace. Reporters shouted questions, but the former CFO could only stare at the ground, his career imploding in real time. Meanwhile, Ethan's words about his mother and Oak Street ricocheted across Twitter and Instagram, accompanied by photos of him serving meals at the center just days before. The contrast couldn't have been starker. One man brought down by greed, another lifted up by remembering where he came from. As Ethan watched the scene unfold through his office window, he felt lighter than he had in years. The weight of distrust and defensiveness had lifted, replaced by something that felt surprisingly like peace. His assistant poked her head in. Sir, the Oak Street staff is on line 1. They've seen the news. Ethan nodded, reaching for the phone. It was time to rebuild more than just a building. It was time to keep his mother's biggest promise, the one about remembering kindness, even when keeping it hurt. Rain misted the windshield as Ethan's car wound through downtown streets toward Oak Street. His expensive leather shoes splashed through puddles when he parked, but he barely noticed. The weight of the truth pushed him forward faster than the storm behind him. Through the center's windows, he could see Amaya. She moved with quiet purpose, stacking chairs and boxing supplies. Her shoulders were tight, her movements mechanical, the posture of someone preparing for loss. A box of children's art supplies tumbled from her arms, scattering crayons across the floor. She knelt to gather them, and even from outside, Ethan could see her hands trembling. He pushed through the door, rainwater dripping from his suit. The sound made her look up, her eyes wary and tired. I thought the crews weren't coming until tomorrow, she said softly, still collecting crayons. There won't be any crews. His voice was hoarse. The demolition's cancelled, for good this time. She froze, a red crayon clutched in her hand. What? Stanton engineered everything. The penalty clause, the fake leak, all of it. Mrs. Delaney brought me proof. He ran a hand through his wet hair. I was wrong, Amaya. So wrong to doubt you. Thunder rolled overhead as she stood slowly. The letters were real. Every word my mother wrote was real. His voice cracked. And I almost destroyed everything she believed in because I was scared to trust. Amaya set the crayons on a nearby table, studying his face. What happened? I fired Stanton in front of the board, exposed all his schemes. Ethan gave a tired laugh. Then I sold my penthouse and car collection to pay the penalty fee myself. $10 million to keep this place safe. Her eyes widened. You gave up everything? Not everything. He gestured to the worn walls around them. This place fed me once. My mother served meals here when I was little. Mrs. Delaney showed me the photos, helped me remember. He swallowed hard. I learned something from those letters finally. I learned to say yes, to hope, to trust, to keeping promises even when it hurts. Amaya's eyes filled with tears. She crossed the room in 3 quick steps and wrapped her arms around him, not caring that his suit was soaked through. The hug was fierce and forgiving all at once. I knew, she whispered. I knew there was kindness in you, even that first day in the rain. Thunder crackled again, closer now. They stepped apart, both wiping their eyes and pretending not to notice. We should call Mrs. Delaney, Amaya said, reaching for her phone. And the city officials need to know the demolition's off. Ethan nodded. Already started the paperwork. But there's something else. He took a deep breath. I'm turning this into the Hale Foundation, a permanent endowment to protect community programs across the city. And I want you to help lead it. She stared at him. Me? You know these people. You understand what they need. And you never lost faith in what this place could be. He smiled slightly. Besides, someone needs to keep me honest. Amaya tilted her head, considering. One condition. Name it. We build promises small and keep them big. Her eyes were serious. Just like your mother wrote. Ethan felt something tight in his chest finally release. Deal. They spent the next hour making calls to Mrs. Delaney, who cried happy tears, to city officials, who promised updated permits by morning, to the youth program leaders, who immediately started planning celebration parties. Outside, the storm was passing. Sunlight broke through the clouds, casting rainbow patterns through the old stained glass windows. Amaya hung up her phone after the last call. The kids want to know if you'll play chess again tomorrow. They say kings still don't quit. They're right about that. Ethan looked around the room. At the scattered crayons, the well-worn furniture, the walls that held so many stories. We have a lot of work ahead. Good thing we're not doing it alone anymore. She smiled, warm and certain. A car honked outside, Mrs. Delaney arriving with coffee and donuts, insisting they needed to celebrate. As Amaya went to let her in, Ethan touched the wall gently, the same wall he'd almost torn down, the same wall where his mother had once served meals to a frightened little boy who would grow up to save it. Promise small, he whispered. Keep it big. The next few days brought a whirlwind of activity to Oak Street Center. Morning sunlight streamed through freshly washed windows as volunteers hustled back and forth, their arms full of decorations and supplies. The scent of fresh paint mingled with coffee from the makeshift refreshment station where Mrs. Delaney kept everyone caffeinated. Ethan found himself in the thick of it all, his sleeves rolled up as he wrestled with tent poles in the courtyard. A group of kids sat cross-legged nearby, making signs with glitter and construction paper. Mr. Hale, you're doing it wrong. 8-year-old Tommy called out, giggling as Ethan tangled himself in canvas. Oh, really? Ethan raised an eyebrow. Would you like to show me how it's done? Tommy scrambled up, eager to help. Together they figured out the proper assembly, and soon a row of white tents lined the yard. News vans parked along the street, reporters filming as children practiced their dance routines for the festival. Over here! A little girl in pigtails shouted, waving at the cameras. Her friends joined in, turning cartwheels on the grass while the reporters smiled. Inside, veterans gathered around the old dining hall, sharing memories. Mr. Johnson, a grey-haired Marine, pointed to a worn spot on the wall. Ruth Hale always stood right there, serving her famous vegetable soup, he said, his voice warm with remembrance. Never met a kinder soul. She'd slip extra bread to the kids when she thought no one was looking. Ethan paused in the doorway, listening. His throat felt tight as he imagined his mother here, ladling out bowls of hope along with the soup. Amaya appeared beside him, carrying something wrapped in brown paper. "I have something for you," she said softly. He unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a simple wooden frame holding a photograph he'd never seen before, his mother in her favorite blue dress, kneeling beside a small boy with untied shoelaces. Both were laughing as they set plates on the old meal table. "Mrs. Delaney found it in her albums," Amaya explained. "I thought it belonged here, in the entry hall, so everyone can remember where this place began." Ethan ran his fingers over the glass, tracing his mother's smile. "Thank you," he whispered. They hung it together, centered on the wall where everyone would see it as they entered. The afternoon light caught the glass, making the old photo glow. The ribbon-cutting ceremony began at sunset. City council members stood alongside neighborhood families, while reporters gathered at the edges. The chess kids who'd first challenged Ethan wore their best clothes, proudly holding the ends of the red ribbon. Mayor Chen stepped forward with a brief speech about community and renewal. But it was Mrs. Delaney who captured hearts when she spoke about Ruth Hale's legacy of small promises kept large. "This center has always been about saying yes to hope," she said, her voice carrying across the crowd. "Yes to hungry children, yes to lonely veterans, yes to anyone who needed a warm meal and a warmer welcome. Today, we say yes again." Ethan and Amaya cut the ribbon together, their hands steady on the scissors as camera flashes popped. The chess kids immediately challenged Ethan to a rematch, tugging him toward their favorite table while everyone laughed. As evening settled in, volunteers lit paper lanterns. They glowed softly in the misty rain that had begun to fall, creating halos of light across the courtyard. Children danced beneath them, their shoes splashing in puddles. Amaya found Ethan watching it all from the porch steps. She sat beside him, both of them content in the gentle quiet. "This is what saying yes looks like," she whispered, gesturing to the scene before them, the lanterns, the laughter, the life flowing back into every corner of Oak Street Center. Ethan smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes and settled in his heart. For the first time in years, he felt completely at peace. Above them, the lanterns dotted the rainy sky like earthbound stars, lighting the way forward. The morning dawned clear and bright, washing away days of endless storms. Sunlight painted the streets of Oak Street in warm, golden hues, catching droplets that still clung to leaves and window panes. The air felt fresh, renewed, like the neighborhood itself. Ethan arrived early, his footsteps echoing on the newly swept sidewalk. The center stood transformed, no longer the weathered building he'd once planned to demolish, but a beacon of hope with its fresh coat of paint and flowering window boxes. Children's artwork decorated the windows, and somewhere inside he could hear young voices raised in morning song. He carried his mother's final letter, now carefully preserved in a simple frame that matched the others lining the entry hall. Each one told part of their story, his mother's dreams, his journey from resistance to understanding, and finally, to love. The hallway smelled of lemon polish and fresh coffee. Someone, probably Mrs. Delaney, had already been through, preparing for another day of service. Ethan's shoes squeaked slightly on the clean floors as he searched for the perfect spot for this last piece of their story. He found it near the entrance, where everyone would see it. Carefully, he hung the frame, adjusting it until it sat perfectly level. His mother's handwriting flowed across the aged paper. "Promise small. Keep it big." 5 simple words that had changed everything. His fingers lingered on the frame as morning light streamed through the windows, making the glass gleam. In the quiet moment, He could almost hear his mother's voice, feel her gentle presence in every corner of this place she'd loved so much. The sound of children's laughter floated down the hall from the activity room, where early arrivals were already setting up for morning programs. He recognized Tommy's distinctive giggle among them, probably planning his next chess strategy. Mrs. Delaney poked her head out of the kitchen. "Good morning, Mr. Hale," she called warmly. "You're here early today?" "Just finishing something important," he replied, gesturing to the newly hung frame. She walked over, wiping her hands on her apron, and read the words. Her eyes softened. "Ruth would be so proud," she said quietly. "Not just of the center, but of you, Ethan. You've become exactly the man she hoped you'd be." The simple truth of her words touched something deep in his heart. He nodded, not trusting his voice for a moment. As he turned to leave, he caught sight of bright flowers through the window, pots of marigolds and petunias that the children had planted during the festival, adding splashes of color to the concrete. Even the old basketball court had been repainted, its lines crisp and white against the fresh blacktop. Outside, Amaya sat on the front steps, 2 coffee cups beside her. She wore a bright yellow sweater that seemed to catch the morning light, making her glow. When she saw him, her smile widened. "I thought you might come by early," she said, holding out one of the cups. "Hazelnut, black, just how you like it." He settled beside her, accepting the coffee gratefully. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the neighborhood wake up. A mother hurried past with 2 small children in tow, all of them wearing backpacks. An elderly man walked his dog, tipping his hat as he passed. Somewhere down the street, someone was practicing piano, the notes drifting softly through open windows. The first drops fell so softly they barely noticed. Then the gentle patter increased, summer rain returning like an old friend. Ethan reached for his umbrella just as a young family approached the center's steps, a tired-looking mother with 3 children seeking shelter from more than just the rain. Without hesitation, Ethan stood and opened his umbrella wide. Instead of covering himself, he held it out to protect them as they climbed the steps. The youngest child, no more than 4, gave him a shy smile that reminded him powerfully of himself at that age, seeking shelter in this very place. "Welcome to Oak Street Center," Amaya said warmly, already moving to help the mother with her bags. "Come on in, we're just about to serve breakfast." Ethan kept the umbrella steady as they passed, then extended it to cover Amaya as she guided the family inside. Through the open door, he could hear the growing sounds of morning activity, chairs scraping, dishes clinking, voices calling greetings. The scent of coffee and fresh bread wafted out, mingling with the clean smell of rain. He paused for a moment, looking into the bright interior of the center. Children darted past the windows, veterans gathered around their usual table with newspapers spread out, and Mrs. Delaney's voice rose above the happy din, directing volunteers to their morning tasks. Standing there, umbrella tilted against the gentle rain, Ethan felt something settle in his chest, a certainty he'd never known before. After years of building walls and chasing success, he'd finally found his true purpose. Not in towering buildings or business deals, but here, in this place of small promises kept large, where every day brought new chances to give and receive love. For the first time in his life, he was exactly where he was meant to be.